The world of startups in general is very fraught with danger, and it's a high rate of failure because of the many difficulties and challenges you can face. AI is affecting every phase of the software engineering development and lifecycle. In general, in summary, the biggest mistakes I see in Australian context when it's existing organisations.
Welcome to the Butterfly Podcast, Season 1, Episode 1. To kick things off, I'll be talking to our CEO, John Anderton from Butterfly, about platforms, what they are, and how organisations can monetise their IP. So welcome, John. Maybe we can start off by defining exactly what we mean by platforms.
A platform is really another name for a complicated or interconnected website that might use things like an app or connect to third-party systems, but it basically enables an organisation to connect with its stakeholders in different ways. Now, that might be customers, it might be suppliers, it might be other competitors, it might actually be creating a new business model. It's really quite broad. But as an example, for an alcohol and drug rehabilitation facility, they had a vision for using biometric data collected by wearable devices in the sort of in therapy experience, and in that way, yes, there's a software platform involved that will tie together the data from the wearables and then apps presented to iPads and iPhones, and also websites for different people to interact with. So the software engineering encompasses all of that part. What the user sees might be a website or an app, but the organization can use it in very different ways, and they can be as diverse as the different types of organizations that there are.
Okay. So have you got an example of some of the organizations you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to building platforms, sometimes we work with established organizations like PKF, which is a global accounting firm. We've built a whistleblower platform for them, so organizations can provide a facility for customers or employees or other stakeholders to anonymously report complaints and then be handled appropriately. So that's a corporate example. And then you get startups. So, for example, in the skin cancer space, we built a platform where everyday people can take a photo of something suspicious on their skin, and it gets diagnosed by an Australian skin cancer trained GP. Mm-hmm. And basically, from the comfort of their home, they can get their issue reviewed, and where needed, get a recommendation to go to a doctor and do something about it, or not to worry about it. In that project, we also had AI over the top of it. And so that's kind of, two extremes, going from a corporate to a startup. We also do it for things like government. So for Dairy Food Safety Victoria, which is a state government regulatory body, they interact with all of the players in the dairy market, and that goes from farmers to milk processing facilities and cheese making. We built the regulation technology platform, so that's really the system that all of the players interact with.
All right, so it's not really one industry in particular. Not any industry or organisation could benefit from a platform.
Yeah, definitely. And in many ways, we work with people who work in an industry and have done for decades, and they can see a better way to do things using modern technology. So in Australia, there's some areas of healthcare still run on faxes, but people might use Uber in their sort of driving experience to get a car from place A to place B, and then in a work environment have a really difficult time trying to work something out. And so we can kind of take what works from an app and a web-based system and then move it into a different industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. In regards to monetising IP, do you have any examples how you've helped an organisation in the past, monetise some of their IP?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this also goes to the philosophy of the startup. We've worked with US-based startups, which they aren't worried about being revenue generating as soon as possible. Australian startups are, they have to be. So they need the money to get through the valley of death until they're past break even so they continue to grow. And that's also a big part of the story for the investors going to the platform. Now, if it's a corporate, it's usually more they know how to do something, and we build a platform for them to be able to make money off that service. We've done things like we made a video chat platform for a vet, so he can leverage who he talks to by providing services all around Australia, for example. And that's an area where he's got this intellectual property, and you're kind of monetizing it. In some way, the ability of doctors to diagnose skin issues is the same, where people can take a photo sitting at home, and you can have a doctor on a beach just sort of swiping, and
Mhm.
in a few minutes, the doctor can cover hundreds of patients, and therefore, in terms of dollars per hour, that doctor's able to really monetize their knowledge there.
Yeah, I hope that doctor on the beach is also looking after his skin as well. Um, you mentioned some pitfalls just at the start in regards to startups, but are there any pitfalls other organisations need to be aware of?
Definitely. The world of startups in general is very fraught with danger, and it's a high rate of failure because of the many difficulties and challenges you can face. You might make a bad product. People may not want to pay for it. You might make a great product at the wrong time. You might have the wrong team of people launching it. You might make technology choices incorrectly. If it's within a larger organization, there's other factors come to play. So they've usually got budget to keep things going, but then you might also have other departments want to sabotage what you're doing because it doesn't help them. And this is where you see there's a real trend in America when they're a giant company trying to do something innovative, they'll push it into a skunk works or a smaller organization to go and do it, because if they try and do it in the main organization, it'll just get overwhelmed or squashed. The biggest mistakes I see in Australian context when it's existing organisations is poor tech choices early on, locking in decisions. A lot of senior stakeholders in Australian organisations don't really understand much about the technology or the implications of the early decisions. For example, if you go and employ a chief technology officer and that person's sort of programming languages of choice are Microsoft, you are automatically choosing that effectively you're going to build your platform within the Microsoft world. You're also choosing that your software engineers are going to cost more than other platforms. You're making all kinds of consequential choices that you would not be aware of, and really until it's 18 months, 2 years down the track, you won't know.
So to kind of mitigate, that sort of scenario, what's your suggestion that organisations can do to make sure that they kick it off on the right foot?
Definitely one of the things they could do is work with an agency like Butterfly, where we've done it before over and over and over again. We can kind of give advice. But the other thing is the nature of the relationship. If you're an organisation that wants to do something and you engage Butterfly to do it, we can help you get to market with a first version, and we will deliver because it's important to us. If you don't like us or we don't deliver in the way you expect, well, then you can just replace us with somebody else. By contrast, if you hire a team of people, the natural tendency is to keep their jobs going and to expand their empire. So you start with 3 people this year, and in a year you're going to have 7 people.
Hmm.
And maybe they finish the first version, but they find reasons to keep going. And then you end up this sort of feature creep, or they're always building, but it's not really necessarily hitting a return on investment. You also get access to critical thinking in a way that's not possible if you're paying people's salaries. If a non-technical decision maker asks us for something that doesn't make sense, we will tell them that, and we will get a senior person to escalate the message if required. Whereas, I've seen many organizations, they'll hire junior developers because they'll, be cheap. And then you have a non-technical person instructing them to do things without really understanding the technical ramifications. Now, we've seen systems where payroll information is completely open to the internet, or credit card details, or massive security vulnerabilities, because, maybe a senior decision maker didn't like having to log in. And so we see that sort of pattern repeated.
How do you find, you're talking a lot about development side of things, but obviously with platforms, there's also the user interface and the user experience part of it. How can organizations, when, thinking of building a platform, consider those sort of things?
I think it's really important. Certainly when we're planning a platform, that's really goes to the core of what we're doing. And then if you work with an agency like Butterfly, we've got a range of skill sets. So we can bring in a user experience designer, we can bring in a user interface designer, and then a front-end engineer, make sure it all works well. One of the pitfalls I've seen is organizations just hiring a designer without really understanding the different nuances between a UX and a UI, or, app, for example. We've seen the government hire junior designers and give them UX app designer roles where they didn't have the skill set and they did not have the experience. And if you look at the cost of that, a full-time employee, if you go to an agency, you can hire one of their best people for, a couple of days worth of work, and they will give you the answer. Versus you put someone on payroll and you've got to provide equipment, and then, the months drag on, and it's going to cost you a lot more. And you've got a junior doing the work. That's the advantage an agency can bring.
No, great. How does AI fit into all of this? And, can you see AI, helping platforms within organizations?
Yeah, for sure. So we see AI as affecting every phase of the software engineering development and lifecycle. In general, in summary, it'll make it cheaper and it will make it possible to be more sophisticated. So you will still need experts to know how to use it and get it working together properly. It won't be as easy as, you go to ChatGPT and just make the platform. If you do that, there's all kinds of issues. You're not really sure where the security holes are. What happens when you want to change something? If you've got a non-technical person instructing the AI, how much before they break it? So we see AI, it will definitely get better at generating code. It'll definitely become better at assisting the design tools. Design is something like fashion, where humans are always going to be at the front of it. In the same way that you can get automated coffee machines, or you can buy your coffee from a barista, when it becomes important enough, you will pay a human expert to do that role and do that role well. So if you think that through a bit more, if you're an organization wanting to build a platform, you can use AI to make a much cheaper minimum viable product, or first version. And you kind of play with it, make sure that you've got customers who will pay for it. And then maybe a version 2 is you spend a bit more time, you invest the time to plan it and design it and build it better, maybe more hand coded, and it'll work exactly the way you want.
Yeah, it sounds like planning's a big part of building a platform. You want to get that planning right before you kick it off.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone loves agile and the idea of shipping a usable product after every sprint. But the reality is, we're normally working with non-technical founders. They've got a lot of ideas in their vision. When we get them into a room and brainstorm with them, it's not just getting their ideas onto out of their head onto the table. We're also giving our perspective as well, and in many ways, we're kind of shifting and developing the idea together, kind of like baking a cake. They might bring the flour, but maybe we've got the water and the bicarb soda, and we've got the right shaped tin. If we often bring things back to what's important for the users. Founders are often very centered from the vision perspective. So what's important to them, they think is very important. Sometimes you need to bring an alternative perspective. If the founder is not the target buyer, well, what the founder thinks is important may not be the most important features. That's not to undermine the supremacy of the founder in a startup environment. But if you want to provide these sort of alternate perspectives and fact check their perspective, I think you end up with a more robust platform. When we're planning, we don't just plan what we're building now, we plan 2-3.5 versions ahead. And what that means, we're building, what we're building today, what we're building in 6 months, what we're building next year. In that way, we can make our tech decisions appropriately. Are we building a prototype that we can throw out in 6 months? Or are we building the foundation that we want to write more code on top of for 5 years? That's two very different routes. And if we start down one and the founder thinks we're going down the other, we have a problem. But that's why, we like to think ahead and we like to plan and figure out how much it's going to cost. And in that way, it's more like building an apartment building. If we lay the foundations for a one-story building and then you start putting 70 stories on top of it, you're going to have a problem at some point. But by the same token, if your budget is only one story, you don't start by digging 4 levels of car park.
Yeah, no, exactly. I guess that leads to my final question, which is, what are the key questions a leader should be asking development agencies before they commit to working with them?
So I would want to know the people I'm going to be dealing with. I'd want to know the experience at this sort of building this sort of thing, at working with a non-technical founder. That's who we typically deal with. If a non-technical founder is primarily dealing, for example, with software engineers, there can be a very big gulf there. I'd be looking for flexibility. I'd be looking for the ability of the agency to bring ideas. The flexibility side of things is important because the founder is going to know most about the project 6 months after it deploys, when it's in the hands of real customers and you can see how they're interacting with it. The agency's been through this cycle over and over again. They should know that. They should be able to bring that value add. But the founder in the initial phase, it's still an undeveloped idea, like it's raw materials. You got the flour, but it's not cake. You need the flexibility along the way so that if you start realizing things, you need to pivot, then you want to incorporate the best ideas at the time, as opposed to be locked into a scenario that you agreed to a year before when you have this information.
Yeah, no, excellent. Great questions there. Was there anything you'd like to just tie up the conversation around platforms?
Probably about research and development, tax incentives, which can be really valuable for organizations. The reality is that our world, people are saying software is eating the world. If your organization is not pushing forward and innovating faster than the market you're in, then you're going to be in trouble and somebody else will come and innovate the space for you. So I'm always reflecting on, okay, well, who's the end customer here? Who's the target user? What's delivering them the most value? How can you automate that? What's the most important thing to get that right for them? And then how do we get that to market as quickly and easily as possible so you can test and see, were your assumptions right? What else can you add on later? But how can you get there as fast as possible?
Yeah, no, wonderful. Well, that's it for our first episode. I hope everyone got something out of this. We're looking forward to making some future episodes in the coming months. Thanks a lot for your time, John, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Darryl.